Hello, hello. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Hoping to cover all the time zones. Yeah, it's getting a bit dark here in Berlin for me, so I hope the lighting will work. Yeah, we don't have such a strong sun. Unfortunately, summer for us is almost over, but we do enjoy it a bit more of light till we have it. So, welcome to our second panel that we started this series this summer. First, if you remember, we had one on code reviews, and today we are going to chat about one of the most loved projects or products that we have here at Cosmos. Without further ado, the topic for today would be to um, talk about the building live coding experiences with drum rolls, Sandpack. Um, to be honest, this is one of my favorite topics because each week, whenever we enter all of these social media platforms, not even going to mention the names because they change so often these days, but at least 2 or 3 times a week, we get nice word, good vibes from people thanking Sandpack and how much they love using it. And I'm not going to talk alone because you already probably know me. I'm going to have today with me two fellow maintainers, contributors, users of Sandpack. The first one would be Alex Moldovan, my colleague here at Cosmbox, and he is a product engineer. And the second one would be Josh, that just Como, I hope I'm saying it correctly,
Perfect.
which is one of the content creators that use this Unpack. And I'm not going to tell more about how they use it because probably George can tell it even better than me. Thanks so much, guys, for joining me. How are you today?
No complaints. Going well.
Yep,
Yeah, I think for
and it's
you it's
actually
like
even darker
midday.
here, so
Yeah, it's just
sorry for
after
that.
lunch. Just after lunch here on the East Coast of North America, so it's a good time.
Yes, then thanks for having lunchtime with me, and also thanks for joining us your dinner time, Alex. I think you are the most Eastern for us. Yeah. So I think probably the best way to start this is to have a bit of story time about how Sandpack came to life. And I think, Alex, you can help me out here telling us more details about how this came from an idea to an actual product out there.
Sure, yeah, and I can also give it a little twist, like a personal twist, with how I came across Sandpack. Um,
Oh,
I can start with that actually. I came across Sandpack actually when it was released, the day it was released, because it was released on stage in Cluj, in my hometown, at JS Heroes, where Yves kind of had a presentation back in 2018, yes. And this was kind of like the big reveal that people were kind of aware back then already of Code Sandbox. Code Sandbox started earlier, and it was already a very popular tool for building this playground in the browser. And then the big reveal that was that everything that Code Sandbox does to kind of build this React or Vue code or whatever you have there in the browser to show a preview, which was kind of felt very magic back then, now is open
mm,
source and is this library called, back then it was called Smooshpack. Not sure if everyone was working in tech back then. There was like a big thing around think Smoosh back then. There was a big discussion whether it should be a function in the core language or not. Anyway, I not want to diverge. Um, so this was the original announcement, and it was kind of like the bundler, what we internally call the bundler, and also externally of Code Sandbox, and it was kind of exported as a package. You could install it, and you can with the idea of that you could build your own code editor in the browser. It was a package like any other on npm. Um, but the project itself was not really uh, so used, was not really so popularized. I think Code Sandbox was going through a period of growth.
before or after we changed the name, just to be sure, because there was Mushot, it was like a bit
Yeah,
confusing,
the
right?
name change was somehow somewhere in between. Uh, Thing is, 2.5 years later, I so back just back in 2018, I had no affiliation with Code Sandbox. 2 years and a half later, I joined Code Sandbox, and coincidentally, like the first project that I was handed was like, hey, there's this React library that we built a while ago. Let's uh, let's make it more like a usable thing. Let's popularize it and figure out if people can make use of it. And this is kind of how we started investing more in it. And we said, okay, let's try to make it. We really focused on making sure there's a proper developer experience, because it's it's not that straightforward to build a code editor, and code editors can be
Yeah.
intimidating for someone that wants to integrate them into their projects. So we wanted to have both a version of Sandpack where you just say, okay, I want to install this and I want to get like the most presetted version ever. Just give me one component that I can drop into my code, and it will just do something. It will show something. But we knew that the moment when this was becoming more popular, there was an instant need for customization, right? For
Mm,
being able to,
yeah.
flip the preview with the code editor, put the preview under, add new dev tools to it, like a console, like anything that could be useful to build like this small interactive environment in another page, right? In an embed in the page. So yeah, we this is why we focused a lot, and we spend a lot of time on trying to figure out what's the right approach here, so that we can export both Sandpack as a whole, but also its parts, so that you can pick those parts up and build your own custom thing, later on.
Yeah. Well, it's a good time to say that we'll do take some questions in the end, and thanks. We'll have also our colleague in the background, Felipe, to help us with this. Um, yeah. Was there anything else you want to add there to the storyline, Alex? Or
Mm, I guess so. That's back. I guess starting in 2021, we started pushing more for Sandpack. We had a collaboration
mm,
with the React team, where the React docs were implemented using Sandpack, and they used a very custom implementation of Sandpack. So we worked extensively with them, perfecting the library at the
mhm,
same time. We grew the team at some point. We had other people from the company joining. I'm personally not really maintaining it today anymore, as our colleague Danilo is more involved into it. But yeah, that's the story, that at least from my from my perspective
point.
at
Yeah.
that point in time.
Yeah, I think, like you said, we also it's good time to mention our other colleagues, the Danilo and also Jasper. And I know that we had after the launch in 2022 an MIA with you all in Discord. I'm gonna try to find the link soon and post it now in the comments too. Thanks so much for everyone saying hi. It's really lovely to see everyone jumping in. And I'm trying to link the article there. You can see exactly the Ask Me Anything session that you all three had with Ace back then. What do you think are the biggest challenges and milestones with Sampac? You started mentioning them, a few of them, like the beginning, and after that, adding a few of the things that people ask or you felt it was needed. But was anything else that you would worth mentioning as a big challenge in developing it or a milestone for Sampac?
Yeah, I think so. The first challenge was definitely trying to figure out that nail that developer experience, so that we can have some proper adoption, because just working with the raw editor is much more
Yeah.
complicated and requires much more in-depth knowledge of how an editor works. um, then I think there were two other milestones, or two other important challenges. One was, uh, how do we know how to react to the initial wave of adopters? Like, people are going to have start asking for, can you build that? Can you build this? Can you build that? And how do you maintain kind of the library to a point where it's, first of all, maintainable, and also offers the maximum capability to people. um, and then the last challenge that we kind of went through, I guess, was when we figured that we could take this to kind of to the next level, and we started talking about running more than browser code in Sandpack. And this is where I don't really have a lot of background, because this is kind of the time where I stepped down from the project. But the evolution of Sandpack, which we call Notebox, was kind of like a
Hmm.
big milestone, as it really uh, kind of took all the learnings from building Sandpack as a library for uh, browser code editor kind of embedding, and then took it to creating basically a runtime for building node applications in the browser.
Indeed, was Josh one of the people that asked to implement something?
I've asked for quite a few features, yeah, and the team has actually been great at either developing the feature or providing, or just explaining that, like, it's we only have so much time and it doesn't quite fit into our priorities, which is absolutely fair. I've maintained open
Yeah.
source stuff myself, and so I know how it goes. And I feel like the team has been much more gracious than I I have been on some of my own projects in terms of taking every request, at least like to a certain degree, actually thinking it through and considering the implementation in that.
Yeah, I was literally about to say that also having anything open source these days out there, I guess we all know by default, is not an easy task. It comes with amazing good things, but it also comes with a less nice part of having too much on your plate. Sometimes you cannot do it as much as you want. I mean, even having time dedicated, having a priority number one for us to be Sandpack, probably we won't have time to implement everything that people will love or ask for. It's just, yeah, most of the times it's not possible to. I don't think I saw any open source project clean or not having issues to triage, bugs, requests, or anything. So it's just the way it is. Yeah, thanks. I think an article, a link about our launch with Notebox would be nice for people to read. So after the call, we're going to share on social media, probably next day is the recording, and we'll add some of the resources that you find now in the chat for you to read them afterwards. And yeah, feel free all the time to jump on Discord too, and be in touch with mostly all our team engineers and the rest. And Alex, when you started this in Cluj, this mushpack, or do you ever thought it will be so adopted and seen in major projects like you mentioned, React or other big, I wouldn't say big name, but big players or people that maybe you would be in contact. Like for example, literally, I know Josh has a lot a big community, and seeing his large community adopting it was something that you envisioned before, or it was a nice surprise addition to the mission and the values that you envisioned for Sandpack.
I think it was a nice surprise for everyone. We were definitely kind of we knew that the fact that we had like that early collaboration, for example, with the React team, was gonna give the project a certain degree of exposure. Seeing that a bunch of snippets that are probably seen by tens of thousands of people as they navigate the docs would inevitably lead to some small proportion of that segment kind of being interested and like at least giving a look to the project. Um, but we even before while it was kind of like this in this still early stage. I mean, not beta because it was already there for some years, but as we were refining and refining, and while the even before the React team collaboration was public, we started seeing people adopting it for like small projects. We started seeing people coming back with PRs to improve, and this was, for me personally, it was a very interesting experience because uh, there are a lot of companies that have projects in open source, but uh, not all of them are getting really to a popular level where people contribute back. It's mostly like an internal thing, and they open source it because they like the transparency behind open source, and they like to build stuff in the public. But at the end of the day, it's still them building and them kind of deciding on everything. But uh, we started seeing very early that people were were very interested in adopting different layers of Sandpack, whether they wanted, just um, the whole experience, or they wanted to just grab like the bundler capability and build their own code editor, integrate into their own projects, build their own uh, kind of experiences. Pretty much, I guess, what Josh was also doing at the same time. So yeah, this was really, it felt really rewarding to see that, um, all the work that we put behind this, and the fact that we kind of we didn't say, oh, this is our secret sauce, we're not going to open source it, but this is kind of like from the beginning, this was kind of the idea. And from Eves and from everyone in the company, that is that, okay, we really want to, we feel like we've built something that is really powerful, and it's worth sharing with other people because it could benefit in yeah, in a lot of other ways. You're muted, Jana.
It had to happen, huh? I mean,
Yeah.
still, years later, it still happens. Was saying that it's really nice to hear that, and I'm glad to say, and hopefully, I'm correct that one of those that benefited is Josh, and I'm definitely looking forward to have another story time about his side of how Sandpack, how um, before telling us how he chose Sandpack, tell us more about yourself and the project you have, and after that, we'll see if Sandpack was a lucky choice or not.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about it. I started my blog I started blogging on Medium in like 2014, 2015, decided to build my own blog in 2019, I think. And right away, like I wanted to build something that had an element of interaction, because I really believe that like we learn best by like experimenting and playing with something and trying things out for ourselves. Actually, I read this book recently, Make It Stick, which I highly recommend for anybody who wants to learn more about learning. And one of the points that it makes is that we're really bad at predicting what effective learning looks like. So like if you sit back, you watch a video, the instructor is showing you how to do it, you're following along, everything is clicking. It feels super, super productive because you're learning all these things, right? You're understanding it. But then when you try to like start your own project, your mind goes blank. And it's like, well, how do I actually do this? Because you've gotten some of the theory, but you haven't gotten any of the practice, right? You've kind of sat back and it's been very passive. So, and granted, I didn't have that level of clarity around it back then, but I had an intuition that to teach something effectively, like there's an active process there. Like you have to sort of get your brain working. And one of the ways to do that is to give someone a sandbox that has some sort of like semi-complete example and ask them to finish it, to give them sort of a new idea and say like, hey, here's one solution to this problem. Can you think of any better solutions? Like experiment with it and see if you can figure out like a nicer way to do this, or what are the drawbacks between these two different approaches, stuff like that. And so when I built my blog in 2019, I took a look at like what the options were for this sort of thing. And the one that I found was by a developer whose GitHub handle is AgniM. And so if you go to AgniM/playground, that's where he has his little library. And it was similar to CodePen, I think, unless I'm mistaking how CodePen works, where it gives you HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And it takes all those code and it bundles them together into one big string, and then it creates an iframe, and it injects, like it base 64 encodes that string and injects it as the source of the iframe. And so this works pretty well, but there's a bunch of like little issues with it. Like one is that it's all running on the same domain. So like there's like maybe some security issues there because people can run code through the same, you're not externally hosting it. You can only have one JavaScript file, right? You can't have multi-files. There's no bundler. Like it's literally just copy pasting into a script tag. And so like that works if you have like a really small demo. If you're doing a blog post about CSS, that tends to be enough because you have your chunk of HTML, your chunk of CSS, and that's all you need. But if you want to teach something like React, like it's really hard to do it with only a single pane of JavaScript. And so I took this library and I built my own sort of framing around it. Like I have, if you look at what that library looks like and what my playground looks like, they look very different because I didn't even actually fork it. I copied all the code into my own project and just like made all the modifications that I could write in the code base. And I was really happy with the presentation, but I did feel like I was limited in the sorts of things I could demonstrate because of that. And around this time, I started working on a course, CSS for JavaScript developers. And a big part of this course is sandboxes that include React snippets, because we were learning CSS in the context of modern JavaScript frameworks. And I think the timeline's a little bit fuzzy because I have a hard time understanding what happened when, but I think it was around this time that I discovered Sandpack, and my immediate reaction was like, oh goodness, this is really cool, because one of my like early solutions for the problems that were too tricky to figure out in my playground was to link to a code sandbox and be like, okay, it doesn't quite fit here, hop over here and do it, which works, but obviously like it's more seamless if you can just stay on the same page and not have to juggle tabs. And also then I can like save and restore the things that like, there's a bunch of benefits you can do with that. And my concern was, well, wait a minute, I've put all this time and effort into like making a very particular aesthetic. Like I really like how I've designed it. I like the little buttons that I have and what they do. Like you can format with prettier, you can enable ESLint. Actually, I don't know if I had those things. Again, timelines are not my strong suit. But yeah, so the more I dug into Sandpack, the more I realized, oh, actually, this does work, because it, like Alex was saying earlier, it's not just like a component you drop in. I mean, it can be, but all of you can like dig down into as many layers through the layers of abstractions as far as you want. And so what my actual implementation looks like is I'm using a couple of the components. Like I have the editor, I have the preview, and then I have the hooks, and I use the hooks a bunch to implement prettier and ESLint. I have a React strict mode button that automatically edits the code to include that little thing. So I put a bunch of work into it, and it looks the same as my old one, which is great because it didn't disrupt the experience too much, except now there's all this additional functionality. Another thing I forgot to mention was that the previous tool I was using was essentially like a content editable div. And so like you can't use tab to space, right? All of the little keyboard shortcuts that we're used to were missing. So those are just some of the benefits to it.
That's good. So was it hard to do this decision to change it between the previous tool and Sandpack? Was it like a longer time, literally a list of pro and cons, or you liked it when you saw it and it was like, okay, let's just try?
There was a bit of a delay because I wanted to like sort of see how it evolved over a few weeks, like just to see if this was, because often companies will do like, here's this new thing that we're announcing, and you get buzz for 2 weeks, and then it's sort of quiet. Like I wanted to see if this was more of like a PR generation thing, or like something that Code Sandbox was committed to maintaining long term. When I heard that it's actually the bundler being used in Code Sandbox, that gave me a lot of confidence that like, oh, this isn't like a thing they're spinning off to maybe use as an advertising tool, but like they're actually using it, so they're going to maintain it.
Yeah.
And then it was just a matter of figuring out how much work it would be, because in my course at the time I had 500 individual playgrounds. The thing that made that not totally unbearable though, and there's this pattern that I've used for years that I learned the name of recently, which is the facade pattern, where if you have a tool, you don't use that tool directly, you create a component that wraps around that tool. And so I didn't have 500 Agni M/playgrounds. I had 500 sandbox components. And so then it was just a matter of like, how do I map the props that this component is getting to the props that Sandpack expects? And so I didn't have to go through and change 500 individual components. I just had to figure out how to map it correctly. And there were a bunch of like little hitches with that. So it probably was like a week of work to do the 500, as well as, I don't even know, a couple hundred on my blog as well. So it definitely wasn't like an afternoon project in terms of the conversion, but it was still faster than I would have thought.
And did you get any other, I wouldn't say necessarily issue, but did you find it a hard process to adopt it, implement it, besides, of course, the number of the boxes that you had already, but in other terms, did you find everything you need easy?
It was pretty smooth, yeah. The only like thing, the only tricky thing. So more recently, like one of the things initially was that Sandpack didn't have a static preset. Like you could do React, you could do Vue, you could do Angular. For my CSS course, though, a lot of them don't actually need a bundler, which like I understand is like Code Sandbox's killer feature that they've pulled out. But if you are just doing a CSS file and an HTML file, all you really need is hot reload. Like that's sort of sufficient. and there wasn't a static. This is one of the issues that I raised. And like sort of remarkably, it did make it onto the prioritization calendar, and it exists now, and it's absolutely wonderful. The only little gotcha that I would tell people about is that the static preset specifically uses service workers, and service workers don't work if you've disabled third-party cookies because it runs on an external domain, and I guess browsers bucket it together under cookies. So I've had maybe like 30 or 40 students that it doesn't work for. I created a little troubleshooting guide that I linked them to. So that's just like a little thing to be aware of, that like for really privacy sensitive people who have disabled this, they need to do a little workaround to like enable access for this domain. And it's totally possible. Like I have a little guide that explains how to do it. But other than like that's been the only real bump. Everything else has been seamless.
Is that part of the joy of React Open House? I love the name, by the way.
Well, thank you. Yeah, in the open house we had a couple of, I know like we had one of the lessons was exercises. And I guess I should talk a little bit about this too. My second course, The Joy of React, came out last week. And it also, I think there's 300 Sandpack instances in that one. And yeah, I decided that for the sake of giving people a sense of what the material was like, I took like 3 or 4 lessons and made them public. And there definitely were some Sandpacks in that one. I know there were at least 2 because I had 2 exercises. But even in like the non-exercises, like in the lessons, I find it's a good way just to like, and also like in my course, the line between what is an exercise and isn't an exercise is a little bit blurry. Because sometimes it's very clear where it's like, here are your objectives. I have a list of acceptance criteria. This is what you have to do. Other times it's like a thought experiment where it's like, you know, we're playing with these ideas. Like, here's some code. What do you think is going to happen when you run it? Like take a guess, then uncomment this line of code and see if your guess is right. And so that's not really like an exercise, but it's still like a Sandpack in the middle of my lesson that comes in handy.
That's that's good. And indeed, it's a blurry line between there because we like to hack, we like to code, we like to do stuff. Like you said, we learn by interactions, we learn by examples. It's not something theoretically only. And I like that you mentioned not the lack of trust, but you know, whenever you embrace a new project, you're really curious if they will continue. Especially these days, all big companies have like killed by a specific company. I'm not going to give names, dying sooner than expected. And Alex is one of those people that literally dog food their own work, and he has a really great Twitter thread on explaining how he used Code Sandbox to build Code Sandbox, like the inception of tooling, building the tool while inside of it. And you guys can reach it already in the chat.
It's funny. It's funny because that was actually inspired by Sandpack, because while we were kind of battle testing Sandpack, we had this funny experiment where you could basically run Sandpack inside the Sandpack, and then inside the preview run another one, and then so on. And I think at some point that we got to a point where like I think nested iframes don't work like after the 6th or 7th, but it was just like a mind-blowing experience being able to go from one to another. Yeah, it was kind of like a precursor of building Code Sandbox in Code Sandbox.
That's cool. It reminds me, a few years ago, James Long was a developer at Mozilla, and he worked on the Firefox debugger, and he debugged the Firefox debugger using the Firefox debugger and had a blog post about that, which was really cool.
Yeah. Yes. I was part of Firefox team, especially the mobile ones, and we were like, yes, and Firefox OS brings memory. We were trying to build everything in web, but in Firefox OS, it was like it's always good to dog food yourself. I mean, you're the first person that has to be happy with what you're building, so you have to check it first. Yep. Yeah, we are approaching the time limit, but I would end with a more nice generic question on a piece of advice that you will give to those that want to improve projects. And after that, we'll see how we use it.
Yeah, I would say that, and it goes back to what I said sort of originally, that the more interactive you can make, whatever it is, right? If you're a blogger, a technical documentation writer, anything in the like developer education space, it's so much more effective to give someone a playground where they can sort of experiment with the ideas rather than a static code snippet. Because it's just, you know, all of us do it. We skim. We don't read word for word. We browse through. And so these sandboxes are like, and granted, you can skim right past them too, but like it really pulls the user in. It gives them a chance to explore these ideas, and that's really where the learning happens. So whenever it's possible, like if I have this idea that I'm trying to explain, and like I recognize it'll be a little bit less work for me to just throw like I write my lessons in MDX, and so I can have my triple backtick and then a snippet of code. And sometimes that's fine, like if it really is just like showing the syntax of something. But I really try to push myself. Like, is there a benefit to someone seeing the preview and having the chance to interact with this thing? And I really try to lean into that whenever I can. So that would be the advice: is just like don't be afraid to make things interactive, even if like it may not be your first impulse. It really does add a lot of value.
Oh, I agree. And I like that you mentioned that most people can contribute, and we should not consider only developers. And this is was part of our values is to make the product, all product, not only Sandpack, in our case, also the Box platform, accessible to everyone and to be empowered while they use, so they are not blocked. And you can see in the chat we shared the resource that we literally wrote about how other people, non-engineers, uses Sandbox. Again, this goes beyond Sandpack. It's something that we have in almost all our projects. We really want to empower everyone to contribute in their team, no matter what flavors they are, which team they are part of. And it's really nice to read this kind of story. I definitely look forward to read more of how other people start doing it. Alex, any advice from your side, or you want to maybe help people see how they can use these days Sandpack?
I'm not sure if I can add anything that's like of greater value. I think indeed it's super powerful to give people this kind of chance to fiddle with the code. I personally, this is how I learned to code. Back in high school, like there was never like, oh, we have to learn this way of coding or have to learn these kind of functions. It was just me and the code editor, and was just trying things out, and this is like the most it for me it was the most effective way of learning to code, and learning it is still is the most effective way of learning a new tool, learning a new
Sure.
library, learning anything. So that's why I really feel Sandpack is great for for docs, um, for any kind of uh, coding, learning course experience, anything that's kind of code centric, and it's for people to learn. But in order to learn, it's always easier to play with than to kind of read something static and then move your tab over to something else and try it and come back to the docs and back and forth.
I think
That's
that's
indeed true. That's
always
indeed.
like, and this is something I've heard from students too, that like the fact that it's all in one page, the moment you change tabs, there's a risk that like another tab will catch your eye, and now you spend half an hour scrolling through Twitter.
Yeah.
So it is. Yeah. I've
It's
heard that
like
from
the
students.
endless Wikipedia, no? You just open, let me read about this, and after, oh, reference to this, and 10 tabs later, yeah,
Yeah.
Wikipedia, not
that's very good
uh,
point.
not social media, right? I love the example.
Well, yes. No, but
I'm
that's a really
also
good point, George. Like, wherever you switch tab, especially nowadays with such a small attention and small gap of attention from people, is like, it's extremely good to have the examples while you read, see it firsthand, and after it, if you want to read more or practice more, you can always go, but not to be forced to go out of the platform.
absolutely. I do think there's something like too that like with attention spans. Like I also try to keep lessons pretty short, and sandboxes help with that because it means that like instead of having like a whole bunch of text to explain something, you have the sandbox that lets them explore it themselves. And yeah, the other little silly point that I'll make, I am like very much on Team Twitter versus Team X. Like I will keep calling it Twitter no matter what they change their name to. Um, so
That's a
that's
tough one on me too. I'm like, honestly, I still, I think I joked the other day. Was like, I'm like, are we really calling it X? Because I saw some platforms trying to change it, and I was like, checking how many instances I have to change in our website, and I was like, are we really doing that? I'm like, it's it sounds so bad posting it on X. It's like, I mean,
Yeah,
again, naming is hard, people. Naming is hard. I'm not
that's
saying
true.
that.
I'm also
Yes.
just a curmudgeon. Like I still call it Facebook,
Yes.
so I'm set in my ways.
Yes, indeed. I mean, we choose our battles, things that we matter, and the others is like just gonna be. I'm gonna be an old time person. I will be that lady that says, "Back in my days when it was called Twitter."
Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. I saw we have one or two questions, and I guess we should try to address them if possible. I mean, we should. I'm really curious to hear. Yeah, how you feel if it's difficult, and how it was for your side to build the bundle.
So
Yes, yeah.
yeah, I just want to make a distinction here. Like the bundler and Sandpack are kind of, in a way, they are two different things because Sandpack is kind of just the wrapper around the bundler. The team the team that worked on Sandpack did not actually touch the bundler of Code Sandbox. Um, I wouldn't be the most experienced person in that area to give pointers, but it has to start around how tooling actually works. So think of how Webpack works,
Mm-hmm.
how it kind of traverses a tree of dependencies and builds modules and passes those modules through some functions and applies some sort of transformations for each file and then puts everything together. That's pretty much
Mm-hmm.
what the browser bundler does, but it in a, of course, in a custom way because that's kind of the core of how Code Sandbox was built. And I don't think there's a specific. I saw there's not a question. I don't think there's a specific tutorial on this because it's a very niche
Mm-hmm.
topic, right?
Yeah.
So I would kind of skim through the code base of. By the way, so in Sandpack, uh, there's the code of Sandpack deals with the Sandpack part with the components and so on, but then the bundler code is also open source in our Code Sandbox
Mm-hmm.
client code base. But you can also look at other solutions, like I said, Webpack, Rollup, um, pretty much the first stage of browser tools because the bundler itself is also now 5 years old. So like it's kind of like the same age with those.
And yeah, thanks for addressing the last question regarding the same recommended books or tutorials. And I would just add that the whole Custom Box team, we try to be. Again, we are a few people only. We are not hundreds, tens like other companies. So we do try to spend some time with our community on Discord. So you can join us there and ask even more questions, or we'll try even on Twitter these days to address some of this, even if it's not related to Sunpack, the whole other topics we can cover on how we build. And yeah, thank you so much, guys, for joining me this evening. I hope it was a good dinner time and lunch time spent with us. Highly appreciated, Josh, for all the work you do. Again, I think you have a wonderful community there. Alex, you and all the engineers here at Custom Box, you have all my gratitude for all the work you guys do. So more than happy to be part of Custom Box. And yeah, join us on Discord. You have the QR code there, or easily subscribe to one of the newsletters that we posted earlier in the chat. More than happy to answer more questions and to see you to a next panel. If you have any topic suggestions for us, like what you would like to talk about with us, of course, related to Custom Box, hit us on social media and we'll try to make it happen. Have a good afternoon, have a good evening, and see you online. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.